Last episode, we talked about what would have happened if Maria hadn't died aboard the Ark. That video will be linked in the description. At the end of that video, Maria and Shadow took Metal Sonic into their home, Maria having promised to upgrade Metal Sonic to be more powerful than Sonic himself, on the condition that Metal Sonic not cause any more trouble. Metal Sonic accepted, thanks to feeling abandoned by Eggman. After an incident with the Bio-Lizard and a Chaos Emerald, Eggman had found a treatment for Maria's NIDS, and it seemed that she would be able to live with her illness for quite some time. Everything seemed like it was going okay, though Maria would have to admit that living with Metal Sonic was an adjustment. Metal wasn't exactly friendly with him as much as he was cordial. The robot mostly kept his distance whenever Maria wasn't upgrading him. One of the first things Maria insisted on installing for Metal was a way for him to speak. Metal had argued against this. He didn't care much one way or the other if he could talk, and it seemed almost to be a waste of effort. Time that could better be spent making him faster, stronger, more deadly. Maria rolls her eyes and says that she's not gonna hook him up to her lab's computer every time they need to discuss the details of her upgrades. Besides, it would be a simple process. She only needed to install a speaker into his head's chassis. While that was the end of that argument, it didn't change much. Even after gaining the ability to speak, Metal Sonic was quiet. He spent most of his days completely silent, just listening to what Maria and Shadow had to say. That was until it came time to talk about his upgrades or whenever Sonic or battle strategy came up. Metal was a bit of a chatterbox anytime something he cared about entered the conversation. The robot took an almost perverse glee in talking about combat, about how he could break and destroy without peer. Maria had to remind him that he wasn't going to be using any of her upgrades to hurt anyone, which Metal agreed to with visible annoyance. Shadow often asked if they could truly trust Metal Sonic, but Maria said that there's no need to worry. She can tell that Metal Sonic intends to keep his promise to her. These upgrades, the promise of enough power to defeat Sonic, was simply that important to him. Maria did have more on her mind, however. She didn't just want to stop Metal Sonic from hurting people, she wanted to help him. She did her best to reach out to Metal Sonic, tried to convince him to change, but she was having very little success. The robot is stubborn, but he's also clearly hurting. Eventually, Maria pushes just a bit too far and brings up the robot's creator, Eggman. She asks him what Metal thinks of the man, if he still cares about his creator. Metal reacts poorly, worse than Maria had even expected. He lashes out, very nearly hurting her in the process, raising the volume on his speakers to scream that he doesn't even want to think about him anymore. Of course, Shadow immediately steps in and things nearly escalate into an all-out brawl before Maria manages to calm the both of them down. Maria tells Metal that she's sorry for bringing up Eggman. She shouldn't be pushing Metal Sonic's boundaries like that. Still, Metal can't just snap at anyone anytime they do something that he doesn't like. Metal Sonic doesn't apologize, though Maria hadn't really expected him to. Metal still had a long way to go. Even if he intended to keep his promise to Maria, they were still a ways away from truly being able to trust him. If directly asking Metal Sonic about his past wouldn't work, then Maria would need to try something else. Maybe she could get to know Metal another way. From then on, Maria throws herself into upgrading Metal Sonic even more eagerly, listening to him intently as he talks about fighting and flying. At some point, Maria asks Metal why he enjoys fighting so much, which causes him to pause. Metal explains that he doesn't enjoy fighting, it's his purpose, it's what he was built to do. Maria laughs to herself and says that Metal certainly seems to enjoy it. He starts talking faster and voicing his opinion more whenever it comes up. That confuses Metal Sonic. He's sure that he doesn't enjoy fighting in that way, but he can't refute what Maria had said. Something in his code tells him that these two facts can't exist simultaneously, and he's not sure how to resolve this error. When he relays this to Maria, she simply says that just because Metal's a robot, that doesn't mean he has to be emotionless. He can be whatever he wants to be. Literally, in his case, Maria could build Metal an entirely new body if that's what he wanted. Metal Sonic clarifies that he likes his current model. Alterations beyond increasing his strength and speed are unnecessary. He adds that he appreciates the offer nonetheless. Maria continues working on an improved fuel source for Metal Sonic, trying to find a good balance between being lightweight and more environmentally friendly, despite Metal Sonic's protests. As she does, Metal admits that Maria may be right. Perhaps he does enjoy fighting beyond it being his purpose. He's powerful, more powerful than almost anything or anyone else on the planet, and fighting against Sonic or any of the others is one of the only times he gets to show that off. It made him feel powerful, feel in control, feel real. He lacks the words to describe it properly beyond that, despite the verbosity Eggman had programmed him with. Maria says that she gets it. Building robots is something like that for her. At first, she was doing it mostly out of necessity, but the more time she spent studying, the more Maria enjoyed the process. She had spent a lot of time studying with Shadow under Gerald on the Ark. The professor had refused to let either of them go without a proper education, despite the circumstances. And she had always enjoyed the challenge of trying to understand something new. Building a machine was almost like a puzzle, one that weighed heavily on her mind while she was working on it. It was difficult and frustrating a lot of the time, but that's what made it worth it. Not to mention that the process itself was just so satisfying. A mix of theoretical and practical, half theory crafting and half building with her own two hands. It was rewarding beyond what she could have imagined, and she almost never even realized how much she enjoyed it. Metal Sonic stares blankly at Maria, and the girl laughs to herself. She says that she had lost her train of thought there for a moment. The point she was trying to make was that there could be a lot of things that Metal Sonic enjoyed doing that he didn't know about yet. Maybe Metal should try looking for them. Metal Sonic doesn't respond immediately, thinking the idea is somewhat silly. Still, he knows Maria is quite intelligent, and if she thought there was merit to this idea, maybe there's something that he just doesn't understand yet. Over the next month, Metal follows Maria's advice. He tries new things, little hobbies that he had never bothered with, never had time for with Eggman. He peruses the entertainment that others satisfied themselves with. TV, movies, books, music. Most of them he doesn't find himself enjoying much. Books can be downloaded and scanned too quickly for him to enjoy the process. He just absorbs the information without experiencing anything. Television seems childish, pointless. Music, however, he finds more enjoyable. It's abstract enough that he can push past all of his sensors and subroutines analyzing every little detail and can experience it in a way that's similar to others. At least similar to how he imagines organic beings experience art. Metal briefly attempts sports and video games and enjoys neither. Sports remind him far too much of the combat he was built for, and he simply wishes he was doing that instead. Video games are simply too easy for him. No matter what kind, he can analyze the strategies or react perfectly to everything that happens. They're boring. Most of the hobbies he looks into are boring, actually. Gardening, chess, pottery, photography, painting, they're all boring to him. But they're boring in different ways, and that's what fascinates him. While nothing he finds can replace the process of battle for him, every little hobby he looks into and discards shows him just how much larger the world is than he thought it was. Each of them is a tiny experience some get engrossed into, that they can spend their entire lifetimes mastering. It's a change in perspective for Metal, one that allows him to understand the world and his place in it better. He is a fighter, a racer, powerful, deadly, precise. Not because he was made to be, but because that's what he has chosen to do. Maria doesn't quite get Metal's revelation, but she can tell that he's happier now. Whatever it was Metal experienced over those weeks, Maria feels like it grounded him, but it's not perfect. Metal is still obsessed with defeating Sonic, still obsessed with power and dominating others. Even if his outlook on fighting was healthier, the robot still seemed like he couldn't leave his old purpose behind. As her upgrades near their completion, Maria begins to doubt herself. Maybe Metal Sonic wasn't willing to change. Maybe she had just been wasting her time. She doesn't let those thoughts take hold, though. Maria wants to believe in Metal, and their time together had shown her that he could change. She just hopes it's enough. Eventually, Maria had finished her upgrades to Metal Sonic. Based on her research, Metal Sonic should be the fastest, strongest, and most durable thing on the entire planet. Eggman's initial design had helped a lot in that department, but Maria came to believe that her own designs had grown to overshadow her cousin's. She couldn't help but swell up in pride when Metal Sonic began testing her final upgrades. She could just tell Metal Sonic loved all of them, and she couldn't help but gush about her handiwork when Metal Sonic finished up all of his tests. She tells Metal that she's so proud of him, which makes the robot pause. Metal says that he hasn't done anything yet. Save the pride for when he actually defeats his loathsome copy. Maria tells Metal that she's looking forward to it. The day of the competition arrives not too long after. At Metal Sonic's request, they had decided on a simple challenge, a race. Maria was slightly surprised by the suggestion, as she knew Metal had a particular love of combat, though Metal says that he enjoys races just as much. Besides, Sonic's main claim to fame was his speed. What better way to show Metal's superiority? Maria says that she can't argue with that logic. Not only were Maria and Shadow there, but most of Sonic's friends had arrived as well. They all wanted to support their friend, though it seemed to be agitating Metal. The Blue Blur himself arrives early, eyeing Metal skeptically when he shows up. Sonic asks Shadow and Maria if they're sure that Metal's not going to do something stupid, and Metal responds that the only stupid thing he's going to do today is spend time around Sonic. That manages to get a laugh out of Sonic, and he remarks that he's never actually been able to have a talk with Metal before. He asks the robot what's on his mind, and Metal simply glares at him in response. Once it's clear that Metal isn't gonna say anything, Sonic jokes that now he has 2 grumpy fakers he has to deal with. With that, Sonic walks away, turning to his other friends and chatting with all of them. Metal is left fuming, frustrated by his copy when he feels a hand on his shoulder. Shadow is behind him, scowling. He tells Metal that he had better wipe that stupid smug smirk off of Sonic's face. Metal responds with a simple nod, causing Shadow to crack a small smile. Not every day that faker gets what's coming to him. With that, Shadow walks off. Once everyone's arrived, Maria explains how the race will function. Given the speed of the two of them, it's going to be a long run, around the entire planet across various biomes and landscapes. They've set up checkpoints that will require both of the racers to stick low to the ground so that Metal can't just fly over the course and skip everything. Afterwards, Maria hands Sonic a small device, a map of the course, she explains. Metal Sonic had downloaded it beforehand. Sonic would be able to use the GPS of the map to stay on course, and he would have as long as he needed to study the track before they began. Sonic says that he'll just need a few minutes. And for anyone curious, Sonic is able to run over the surface of the water to get between different land masses since he can't swim. Anyway, Maria had also set up several cameras at the checkpoints to check for any funny business. That was basically all of the rules necessary. Once Sonic stops scrolling through the map and straps it to his arm, Maria asks the two racers if they're ready. They both give a quick nod, and Sonic's friends all cheer for him. Metal glances over at Maria, Shadow and Rouge sitting behind her. The girl is smiling wide. She flashes Metal a quick thumbs up before declaring that the race has begun. The pair take off, Sonic immediately gaining ground over Metal Sonic. It was frustrating but expected. On flat ground, Sonic was still the fastest thing they had ever encountered, but Metal didn't need ground. More difficult terrain was his specialty, even if he wasn't allowed to take to the skies properly. Focusing on his movement was more important than keeping track of the blue rat. Soon, Sonic was out of Metal Sonic's sight, vanishing over the horizon across the distant hills. Metal pushes his engine even harder, letting the thrill of flight take him and ignoring everything else. Metal Sonic brushes past the first checkpoint, separating the flat plains of the island and the mountainous regions of the Rockies and the United Federation. This was his territory, and he can only imagine he's making progress on his loathsome copy. It's horribly tempting to try and find the bastard and rub it in his face, but that's not productive. He stays focused, makes his way to the next checkpoint. He doesn't see Sonic anywhere there either. Is Sonic ahead of him or behind? Metal shakes his head. Irrelevant. Go faster. The next leg of the race is in an Arctic environment. Less traction, colder weather. Annoyances for his copy, irrelevant for him. Faster. Next checkpoint. More mountains. Next checkpoint. Desert, arid, dry. Next checkpoint. Jungle. Next checkpoint, faster. Next checkpoint, faster. Next checkpoint, faster. Metal repeats this loop until he's almost finished. There's only one checkpoint remaining. His loathsome copy is nowhere in sight. Is he winning or has he already lost? Metal has no idea. He's close to the finish and he needs to win. He's here. Sonic is behind him, gaining on him, fast. They're once again in Sonic's terrain, flat, perfect for running. Metal pushes his engine into its highest gear, as fast as it can push him, but it's not enough. Sonic is still gaining on him. Metal needs to finish the race before Sonic is passing him. He's going to lose. For the tiniest moment, an almost imperceptible point in time, Metal Sonic stops his engine. He's lost. Despite everything, he wasn't good enough. Despite everything Maria had done for him, he had still failed. No, he can't give up. He has to go faster. He has to do whatever he can. Metal refuses to let all of this be for nothing. Metal's thought process lasts only a microsecond, cutting off his engine before redoubling his efforts and pushing as much fuel through it as possible. More fuel than should be possible. Metal pushes and pushes and pushes past any boundary his body tells him should exist, and it's working. Sonic isn't going faster than him anymore. In fact, Metal is gaining on him. The two end up neck and neck, barreling toward the finish line at speeds only they and a select few others can even perceive. And then they cross the finish line. The pair come to a halt, skidding across the ground to get as much traction as they can. Sonic spins around and runs toward Maria, excitedly asking her for the verdict. He rambles on, saying that this was the best race of his life. He doesn't think he's ever run that fast before. Maria says that it'll take a second before they can analyze the results. They had a complex setup here. They needed one to keep track of the speeds the two of them were running. Sonic is bouncing up and down in excitement while Metal stares at the ground, lost in his own thoughts. All of Sonic's friends are crowding around him, congratulating him on doing a good job. Metal stares at them, angry, when Maria gets his attention. Maria says that however this goes down, she's proud of Metal. She had been monitoring his engine's output during the race, and he had gone far beyond any expectations she had for him. Metal had done a fantastic job. Shadow speaks up, saying that he has a good feeling about all of this. He has a smirk on his face, and Rouge chimes in, asking if he knows something that they don't. Sato says that he can't be too sure, but he can keep up with the two of them, and he thinks he got a good look at their finish. Shadow's pretty sure things will turn out pretty well. At that point, they all hear something. Maria rushes over to her computer and announces that she has the results for the race. She steps back, letting the final result play out on screen for everyone to see. Metal stares intently. Metal watches as the pair are neck and neck as they approach the finish line, but barely, just barely, they can all see Metal pull out in front of Sonic. He crosses the last checkpoint first, crosses the finish line mere moments before his copy. Metal Sonic had won. Sonic takes a step back, shocked. After a second, he stammers, saying that doesn't count. It was barely a fraction of a second of a difference. And Metal Sonic got to fly over half the obstacles he had to run through. It wasn't fair. Maria smiles back at him and says that Sonic had a chance to offer his input on how they should set up the race beforehand. He had accepted the terms of the race, and he should simply stop being such a sore loser about it. Sonic is clearly agitated and almost looks like he's going to continue arguing before he stops. Sonic turns to Metal and reaches a hand out. Alright, I admit it. You got me, Metal. You earned this one. Be proud of it. Metal stares at Sonic's outstretched hand and then grasps it. They shake hands and Sonic walks away. His friends rush over to him, but it seems that Sonic wants to be alone at the moment. He waves them all off before running to who knows where. Truthfully, Metal isn't paying much attention to the commotion. It was over. He was the true Sonic now, wasn't he? But even now, his loathsome copy was still out there, still running, still squirming. He had thought that overcoming him would make his hate subside, but it was still there. Nothing had changed. Nothing would change until what? Until he caught and killed Sonic? Would that really change anything? Besting him had already proven to be ineffective despite Metal's earlier beliefs. It wasn't enough to be stronger, to be better than Sonic. Even eliminating his copy seemed ineffectual at this point. What could Metal Sonic possibly do to prove that he was the true Sonic? His thoughts are interrupted by Maria throwing her arms around him. Metal Sonic stiffens, but Maria's squeals of delight surprise him enough that he doesn't snap. Maria says that she just knew Metal would win. They did it. They finally got one over on Sonic. Shadow joins them, laughing behind Maria. He admits that it was satisfying to finally watch someone put Sonic in his place. He wishes that it had been him to do it, but this was good enough. Rouge teases Shadow, saying that this means that Metal had outpaced Shadow as well. Shadow narrows his gaze at Rouge and then says that they should just focus on Sonic's loss for now. Metal discards his earlier train of thought for the time being. Somehow it didn't seem all that relevant anymore. Some time passes. In the aftermath of Sonic's defeat, no one is really sure what to do with Metal, least of all himself. He makes good on his promise not to harm anyone, but he spends even more time by himself than usual. Metal spends that time asking himself the same question over and over. What next? His original plan had been to extend his revenge to Eggman, but with his thirst for vengeance called into question, that plan had seemed less and less enticing. He knew he was meant for combat, but who would he struggle against? He was a warrior with no war to fight, it seemed. He considers briefly causing destruction for its own sake. Of course, his promise to Maria prevented him from doing so, but more importantly, fighting pointlessly felt almost degrading. He had made that promise to Maria for a reason, because surpassing Sonic was more important than the ability to harm innocents. Becoming who he truly was mattered more than causing senseless destruction. It occurred to Metal Sonic in some of those moments of thought that he hadn't ever truly known who he was at all. Metal could only curse Eggman for his failures, that he was designed for such a meaningless purpose as replacing his arch nemesis. His hatred for the Doctor only grew more and more each day that passed. Eventually, Metal shares his thoughts with Maria. Not all of them, but he articulated that he felt he needed a reason to fight. Something beyond power for power's sake. Maria says that she probably won't be very helpful with all of that. She's more of a scientist than a fighter. She only goes on missions with everyone else as a means to an end. But maybe Shadow could help Metal. Maria knew that Shadow took pride in being the ultimate life form and in his own strength, and Shadow fought to protect the people of the world. Even if he and Metal don't share a goal, his thoughts would be much more helpful than Maria's. Metal agrees with that thought process, though he doubts Shadow will want to talk to him. Still, the next time Shadow is alone with a generous amount of time having passed since his last mission, Metal approaches him. His question is simple. Why does Shadow fight? What is he fighting for? Shadow responds immediately. He fights for himself and for those he cares about, to protect them, to stay true to what he believes. Metal asks what it is that Shadow believes in, and Shadow says that it's a few things. He refuses to let anyone else set his path for him. He refuses to let a wrong go unrighted. He believes in justice, his own sense of justice, and he will fight for it. Metal Sonic processes these statements and then thanks Shadow for his time before leaving, which does startle the Hedgehog a little bit. Shadow had expected a longer conversation after such an open-ended question, but Metal leaves almost immediately after the question was asked. Maybe it was just a robot thing. Either way, it means he has to talk to people less, so he's pretty much fine with it. Metal takes some time to consider what Shadow said. The advice is not immediately helpful. He has no one that he cares about. He corrects himself. He has few that he cares about. Maria's upgrades are too valuable to ignore, and her care in seeing that he was as powerful as he could be made her an ally, one he must look over. Those Maria cared about were therefore people he must also care about. Shadow is too close to Maria for Metal to ignore him, and so are Sonic and his friends. They were reclassified from targets for elimination to potentially useful, the most he would ever give such pests. Regardless, protecting others was not his purpose. That leaves the second half of Shadow's statement, fighting for who he is, an idea that strikes a chord with Metal. He is no longer a copy of Sonic, and Sonic is not truly his copy. But without those parameters to guide his existence, what was Metal? Who was Metal? Start with the basics. Metal is powerful, strong, and fast. A machine built for killing and proud of it. Pride is of utmost importance to him. He had always fought to show others how strong he is, and now he had shown everyone that he was the best. They accepted that. That should be enough. But it wasn't, because that's not all that Metal was. He also liked music, particularly heavy metal. He was built by Eggman, but chose to leave him for a new inventor, Maria. Metal Sonic hated being ignored, hated being abandoned. He wanted the spotlight, wanted people to fear him. No, logical error. It wasn't merely fear he wanted. He also enjoyed the look of pride in Eggman and Maria's eyes when he was successful. What Metal Sonic wanted was recognition, and that recognition wasn't given to him despite his power. Because Sonic's friends weren't there for Metal. They were there to support Sonic. The only one who was there to support Metal was Maria. The only person foolish enough to support him, even if he failed. Despite that foolishness, Metal wanted to make Maria proud. Overcoming Sonic was only a part of that goal now. What would Maria want Metal Sonic to be? The answer was both obvious and frustrating. Maria, the naive girl she was, would tell Metal to be whoever he wanted to be. But then again, he was only here because he had chosen to leave Eggman, wasn't he? Metal had already accepted these new parameters. He need only adopt them in their totality. His conclusion was shoddy, full of gaps, but it was enough for Metal at the moment. He would continue his exploration, continue fighting to go stronger as he desired, and soon he would find a more specific purpose for his strength. One day, Maria gets a visit from, of all people, Sonic. He requests a rematch with Metal. Sonic says that he wants to try again, and Metal doesn't need to accept, of course, but he thinks he might be able to beat Metal Sonic this time. Maria laughs and says that she doubts Sonic will be victorious. He can't realistically get much faster than he already is. Sonic's already rubbing up against the limits of his biology. She's certain that Metal Sonic has permanently eclipsed the Hedgehog. Sonic frowns and then says that Maria's more like Eggman than he thought, constantly underestimating him. While the girl's expression does sour at the comment, she says that it's not her decision to make. She gives the robot the news, and Metal decides to accept the challenge. Even if the result remains the same, he gets few opportunities to use his capacities to their fullest. Racing Sonic is one of the few things that fulfills that rush. Maria groans, saying that setting up a second race is going to be a huge pain, but Metal tells her not to bother. It's around that time of year. Sonic will know where to go. They can take this back to where it all started. Sonic smirks at the robot and says he'll meet Metal there before running off. Maria is puzzled and asks Metal what all this means. Metal says that Sonic and Metal first raced on a strange world called Little Planet. There was an entire race course set up there, and they wouldn't need to do much to get it up and running again. Maria is clearly excited to see Metal defeat Sonic once again and asks him to take her with him. Metal, of course, obliges. Soon, all three of them are assembled at Stardust Speedway. It's exactly as Metal remembers it, the location of his first defeat at the hands of Sonic. What better place to assert his dominance over the annoying rat a second time? They don't take long setting things up. Maria gets the machines working again, sans the more destructive elements, and once things are ready, both Metal and Sonic stand at the starting line. The track is neutral, giving neither of them a distinct advantage, a true test of their abilities. Maria gives them a signal and they're off. At this point, they were both much faster than they had been when they originally ran this course. What took several minutes before took only seconds for them to traverse now. It was a quick race, a sprint, not a marathon as their previous one was, and they were much closer. It was difficult to tell which of them was ahead of the other, with their different ways of traversing the environment. It wasn't until they were near the finish line that it became clear who was ahead. Sonic had outpaced him, if ever so slightly, mere inches ahead of the robot. Metal pushes himself further, faster, going beyond his limits once again, but Sonic matches him. In the last leg of the race, a movement in time so small that it was imperceptible to most people, the two pushed themselves to once again go past all of their limits, reaching a speed neither of them had accomplished before. But this time, Sonic kept pace. He won the race, even if by the slimmest of margins. As that truth sinks in, Metal Sonic feels a familiar rage overtake him. He glares at his loathsome copy, already gloating about his accomplishment. Metal turns to him, slowly walking towards Sonic with what they can only assume is murderous intent. Sonic takes a more defensive stance, and Maria steps forward. She tells him that he had promised he wouldn't do this, that if he hurt Sonic now, everything he had done so far would have been for nothing. Seeing that Metal isn't giving up, Sonic prepares for the worst. Then Metal Sonic stops, extending a hand towards Sonic. A handshake. Slowly, Sonic accepts, cautious that Metal will suddenly attack, but nothing ever comes. He asks Metal what all this is about. He thought Metal was angry. Metal Sonic clarifies that he is angry, but he doesn't have a reason to hurt Sonic. Truthfully, he had thought that this loss would mean more to him, but all he really can think about right now is trying to surpass Sonic once again. After all, he can't prove himself Sonic's better if the Hedgehog is dead. After a moment, Sonic laughs and says that's a good outlook. They can be proper rivals from now on. Metal isn't quite sure what that means, but he nods anyway. Regardless, Metal seems more calm than he had previously been. Sonic turns around to leave, but before he does, he gets Maria's attention. He asks her what she thinks about his fabled limits now, and before she can even respond, he speeds away. Maria, pride wounded, can't help but feel frustrated. Now alone, she begins ranting about that insufferable Hedgehog. It just doesn't make any sense. He was just a normal Mobian. How could he possibly be capable of all these things? Maria promises Metal that he'll overtake Sonic again, and this time Sonic won't be able to catch up. Metal decides it's best to not tell Maria that he's starting to agree with Sonic. She is a lot more like Eggman than he first thought. And that's where I'll be ending this episode. As always, let's give a quick shout out to all my members: Elric111, Agent B7, Bokabara, Joseph Florian, Shredding Pixels, and GB484.